I want to welcome everyone here. Can you hear me? Yeah, there we go. We are going to get started with this committee meeting, this Subcommittee A. And before we get started, I'm going to ask Representative Eddie Lumsden to say a prayer for us.
You would bow. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love and your goodness to us and for watching over us and caring for us. We thank you for the opportunity that you've given to each of us to be here today. For those of us who serve on this committee and in this place, we just ask that you would give us your wisdom, your guidance, and direction in all things that we consider, and may it be to honor and glorify you and to benefit the people of this great state. For we pray it in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
Thank you, Representative. We are going to be looking at two bills, and we're going to do something a little different today. We're going to let the presenter, he has two bills. Senator Robertson is going to present Senate Bill 505, and then he's going to do Senate Bill 504. He has another committee meeting to be at to present a bill, so we're going to let him do that now. Is everybody signed up that wants to sign up to speak to the bills after he leaves? Are we good? All righty, we're going to turn it over to you, Senator Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, first bill I want to discuss is Senate Bill 505. Senate Bill 505 accomplishes a couple of things that public safety has needed for a long time. One of the things is we're codifying some rules when it comes to training of our 911 dispatchers. Many times they're lost in the conversation when we discuss public safety, but I know myself and certain members of this committee have depended on those men and women many times during our careers, especially late at night when we're out by ourselves, and that's the only lifeline we have back to our backup and back to those who can help us, back to those who provide us the information we need. But another big part of their job is from the healthcare side, the medical side, saving lives. And so the two things that this bill does that are important is number one, it requires that they are trained. For many years now, individuals were able to get jobs as 911 dispatchers, take the basic training, and then basically the training was kind of left up to the agencies. And some agencies did take it serious and offer annual updates and training, and then some kind of let it go by the wayside for budgetary reasons or whatever. And we feel that it would be important that we address the training issues. But the other part that this does also is it requires that these dispatchers, from a medical standpoint, be trained in how to conduct CPR over the telephone. Many times, a lot of our large cities go down to 0 ambulances during the day, where a lot of their paramedics, EMTs, and others are out on calls, and they get backed up in emergency rooms waiting for the doctors to take the patients in and cut them loose so they can get back out on the street. And during that time, there is no pause in 911 in a medical emergency. So this training, what it would do, it would give the information necessary and the training necessary to these dispatchers to be able to compassionately and concisely communicate with distressed family members or others who may be calling in about somebody distressed and in need of CPR. There were some concerns about the bill as far as developing the programs with Gypstick, and I was able to speak with Director Wigington, and as something that we did, we moved the date out, the effective date out to January 1, 2024, that would give us time to look exactly at what resources would be necessary for the director to make sure this program was stood up, and for us to look at the training that was going to be provided to make sure it was adequate.
Do you have any questions? So, Senator, you've got all the amendments you need, everything set up as far as that goes.
Yes, okay, sir, and I apologize, Mr. Chair. I'm reading off LC 393469S as in Sierra.
Okay.
That's the latest one that I was handed after conversations that we had with the two ladies that have been working really hard on this important legislation, and along with myself and Director Wigington at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center.
Okay, so we're just gonna be clear, you're changing it to beginning of January 1, 2024. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It would state so on line 51
Okay,
and on line 31, and this
Okay.
is all in the new sub, and on line 15.
15, okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, just wanna make sure, because we jump into the next bill in just a second, so you can get out of here, okay? And then we're gonna have some speakers on this bill.
Yes, sir. And
All
I'd
right.
be happy to come back, Mr. Chair, as soon as I present this other bill within this building. I'll testify in front of Chairman Cooper's committee, and as soon as I'm finished
Okay.
there, sir, I'll come back up here.
That'd be wonderful if you'll do that.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, let's go to Senate Bill 504, and let's see, let's make sure, LC 280525S, is that what you got?
Yes, sir. That's what
All
I'm
right.
working off of.
You can go right now.
Okay, thank you. And I know looking at this bill, it's a very simple two-page bill, or it appears to be. We have made some adjustments in order to alleviate some concerns around accountability courts. My relationship with accountability courts has been very, very good, very strong. I had the opportunity to go to Colorado about, I guess, around 6 or 8 years ago, and work with the U.S. Department of Justice to create a platform and a structure for accountability courts in the Chattahoochee Circuit, which is the circuit in which I policed. And knowing the importance of accountability courts, what we attempted to do, if you'll notice on line 50 of the LC number that you quoted, we've added the language that says, provided, however, that such judge may issue an unsecured judicial release for a bail-restricted offense which is not a serious violent felony, as such term is defined in Code Section 17-10-6.1, if the defendant has agreed to enter into an accountability court as defined in Code Section 15-118. And the important part about that is has agreed, because initially when we updated Chapter 17 a couple of years ago, where we made many felonies, especially those violent felonies, charges that required bond be posted, whether that bond be $10 or $10,000. What we have run into is year after year, someone comes along and wants to add something to that long list of bail restricted offenses. And so what we have decided to do is to move all felonies as bail restricted offenses here in the state of Georgia, which still gives the judges a lot of leeway. And one thing we have heard is there's a very extensive list of felonies in Georgia, and that is absolutely true. But many of these offenses, after 31 years in law enforcement, and my good friends on the committee may see things somewhat different, but many of these things I've never, ever not only had to arrest somebody on it, and I've never carried a warrant for the penalty for false information as to a lien on cotton. And so when individuals come out and they want to talk about the many felonies that exist in the state, most of those that we are trying to encompass are Title 16 charges and the few Title 40 charges that fall over into that bail restricted, such as, in Title 40, a habitual violator would be there. But some of the things we just don't run into as offenses that we would normally see individuals being mass arrested for or warrants being taken out for, such as the felony that encompasses packaging onions for sale as Vidalia onions. While I know that is an extremely important thing here in the state of Georgia, very controversial, I myself, after 31 years of law enforcement, can swear under oath that I've never arrested somebody for mislabeling onions. And so, but the importance of this is what we have discovered is throughout our state, the pendulum has swung. And those who go out and commit crimes, and officers arrest them based on probable cause, they receive as much leeway and compassion as possible, while we fail to recognize the safety that's required of those other citizens that are out there, those who go to work every day, do their jobs, attempt to raise their family. All we're asking is for those, as they go through the process of due process, that they have skin in the game. And again, that skin in the game can be $10, it can be $10,000 based on the offense, based on criminal history, based on everything. When we talk about overcrowded jails, there are a lot of people in jail that should not be there for misdemeanors. Judges have the ability today to empty the jails of those misdemeanors. Those that are nonviolent in nature, the judge can do that today. So by passing this legislation, we are not overcrowding our jails. As a law enforcement officer and what I consider to be a subject matter expert, we are not overworking our law enforcement. As someone who has worked in the courts, we are not overloading our court system. What we are doing is we are protecting the families in Georgia, the vast majority of the 1 million Georgians who choose not to commit crimes and who choose not to do things that are wrong and would get them in front of a judge to begin with. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it for allowing me to step out, present this other piece of important legislation, and I will be happy to come back. And I know there are other individuals to testify about this legislation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
All right, thank you so much. We appreciate that very much. Do we have any questions from the committee? We don't have any right now. Has anybody signed up to talk to this bill? Okay, this is 504. We're going to go ahead and do this first. I believe we have Amber Connor.
Yes, sir.
If you'll come to the podium here and introduce yourself, and we'll get you going. Where would you rather go? That's fine.
Thank you.
The floor is yours, Amber.
Yes, sir. I'm president of Concerned Citizens United. It's a crime group where many Atlanta residents speak about their experiences of being victims of crime. We've had this group since 2014, and many citizens have joined the Citizens Police Academy, the Sheriff's Academy. We've toured the jail. We've met with public defenders. We've gone to juvenile court watch. We've met with the DA. We helped get our new DA elected and our new sheriff elected. We've been very active. We've gone to commissioners' meetings. We've met with city council, and we've spoken many times about what we see is going on because we are concerned about every citizen in Atlanta, not just a particular group. And so since following what is going on and hearing multiple citizens in Atlanta give their story about being a crime, with being involved as a victim in a crime, whether it be larceny, aggravated assault, being threatened by a gun. The stories are innumerable. We even sent Governor Dill a petition that had over 2,000 people that had that lived all over the city that reported crimes that were committed against them, and we've done that with every elected official since then. Accountability court is a sentence or a form of disposition and not a pretrial release option. For the last 3 years, we have been asking for judicial transparency and accountability, and especially public safety. Bottom line, we don't feel safe. We have real case examples where judges have overlooked the purpose and benefits of secured bail and disregard the concerns of victims by irresponsibly utilizing signature, catch, and release and UJRs. We also worked to get Senate Bill 403 passed, which made it where judges could not put signature bond and then put a number beside it because there was no money being collected. And so it was just a way where it looked like they weren't just saying sign your name and hopefully you come back. Since then, we have seen that some judges are not even following that legislation. This is why we have repeat offenders coming in and out of jail, and some people who do not need to be in jail remaining in jail. I find it telling that when we introduce legislation like this bill brought forth today, I hear more concern for the person that committed the crime and rarely hear concern for the thousands of victims of crime. Priorities are important. The victims need to come first. Why have Atlanta and many other large metropolitan cities lost numerous police? Because they are demoralized from rearresting the same criminals multiple times and know that our judicial system is broken. We have many people dying of fentanyl overdoses, and I have actually heard district attorneys suggest They receive an unsecured judicial release. Are we all collectively losing our minds to be this unfocused? Fentanyl is killing thousands of people across the United States every day. Look at the stats. Look at the opioid abuse. Look at what's going on around us and see how broken we are as a society. Again, our concerns should be focused on victims, and I believe Senate Bill 504 addresses these issues. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Let's see, the next one I believe we have is Miss Lisa Moultrie. Wherever you feel comfortable. You like that?
Thank you. I'm a prosecutor, and so I feel very comfortable here. But I first want to say my name is Lisa Moultrie. I am the Deputy Chief of Diversion and Community Alternatives Programs under Sherry Boston in the Stone Mountain Judicial Circuit. Thank you for allowing me to speak to this. And thank you to Sponsor Robertson for hearing our concerns regarding accountability courts and adding that amendment. I am here to ask that we go further. Currently, OCGA 17-6-12 has not affected our ability to administer diversion programs because the listed offenses fall well outside our eligibility guidelines. Those are not cases that we would ever put into a pretrial diversion program. And so the way the statute stands now still suits us. We ask that the committee continue to support diversion programs in addition to accountability courts, because we ask that you be smart on crime. Our diversion programs reduce recidivism, they reduce costs in the court system, they allow law enforcement resources to be concentrated on violent crimes, and they support the victims of crimes in what they want from accountability. I've spoken with countless victims in my 17 years as a prosecutor, and I'm proud of that time that I've served in law enforcement. And I'm also proud of the time that I've served in creating and administering diversion programs. This state is by far ahead of the game when we come to criminal justice reform. Governor Deal did a lot to support the changing of our laws to support our spending our taxpayer money in a way that gets us results from the criminal justice system. And that's what I'm asking for this committee as well. Victims of crime are not voluntary participants in the criminal justice system. They did not ask to be victims of crime. They should not be put out any further than they have to be to resolve the crime. When I speak to victims of crime about things that are diverted, that is usually property crimes. Mostly, especially for young people, the victims of crime want it not to happen again. Can we make it so this kid doesn't do this again? Can we get this kid some counseling? Can I get my restitution? Because I'm out, $1,200. And yes, we can get those things, and we can make that kid understand. And we can get the restitution for the victim faster than any court system could or any probation sentence could. So we are arranging for accountability on behalf of victims. Diversion supports court operations by allowing our trial line attorneys to focus on those horrible violent crimes that everyone is concerned about. And that's why we're unconcerned with where the statute stands now and feel that that is enough. With regard to some of the instances of felonies that would be affected, it's not just selling Vidalia, counterfeits that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a 17-year-old without a juvenile record who commits the offense of theft by shoplifting, stealing one pair of designer jeans from the Von Maur store at the mall. We're dealing with criminal trespass, damage to property, where someone's kid gets in a fight and throws another kid's new iPhone to the ground. We're dealing with possession of a knife on campus, where a young man who doesn't have much but has been working as a stock boy in the mornings before going to high school forgets that he has a box cutter in his pocket. These are also the types of felony offenses in Georgia that are now going to be affected by this restriction. The restriction is meant to preserve public safety, but the types of cases that we put into pretrial diversion are not the public safety risks that we're hearing on the nightly news. And this affects more than just the city of Atlanta. This affects statewide, all of our rural districts as well. The place that I'm from, that only has court twice a year. So this has far more implications than has been discussed. And I truly appreciate where the sentiment is coming from and how we got here in the first place. But I don't think that creating a blanket all felony provision is going to serve the purpose that we want it to. Thank you so much.
Do we have any questions? Have no questions. Thank you very much for coming today, Ms. Moulton. Let's see, next we have, is it Adrene Johnson? And if you could do this for me, we have several more just on this bill alone. If you could keep it as brief as you can. You like being at the podium?
I do.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Adrienne Johnson, and I am the Southern Regional Director for the Bail Project, which is a charitable bail organization that operates in Georgia. I grew up in Georgia. I work here. This is my home. The Bail Project is a sunset organization. Our goal is to put ourselves out of business. The services we provide are not statewide, though. At present, we only operate in DeKalb, Fulton, and Richmond counties. And we do our best to help as many Georgians as possible, but there are so many people that we cannot reach who slip through the cracks and are subjected to unnecessary incarceration and the harms associated with it. In our day-to-day work, we encounter firsthand the unmet needs of people who are incarcerated because of cash bail. The vast majority of our clients are people of color, and most come to us with one or more unmet needs. They include housing insecurity and houselessness, substance use and dependency, challenges with mental illness and emotional instability, physical health issues, employment insecurity, and those unmet needs, when they continue to be unaddressed, have been proven to increase a person's likelihood to future justice system involvement. And if the Georgia legislature is seriously interested in improving public safety and preventing crime, it would be wiser to look at improving and optimizing access to critical supportive services instead of doubling down on the cash bail system. Investments in behavioral health services, workforce development, housing, community-based anti-gun violence programming, those have all been shown effective at reducing justice system involvement and improving outcomes for people who are already system involved. SB 504, as it is envisioned, will only expand our mandate by increasing the number of people who are detained pretrial simply because they cannot afford the bail that is set by a judge. Even if you consider amendments that would allow people to be released so that they can enter accountability courts, this would not be a solution. The courts are not a panacea. Many, many people that we work with each day have serious unmet needs that accountability courts are not designed to address. The real solution to our problems, as I've mentioned, is investment in pretrial services and support. Further, this bill would enshrine the inhumane two-tiered wealth-based system of justice that is created by cash bail, a system that favors those with financial resources to pay bail and works against those who cannot afford it. This is a system that should be discarded altogether, and yet 504 codifies one of the primary drivers of local jail overpopulation, requiring that bail be set for every person charged with a felony, regardless of and independent of an individualized ability to pay assessment. It ensures that more poor people will be incarcerated without being convicted of any crime. What you will see in Georgia, if this bill passes, are more people who, if only their needs were addressed sooner, would be detained in traumatic conditions of our state's already overpopulated jails, which comes not only at a great cost to local jurisdictions, but also at a great cost to our state and our communities as we grapple with lost employment, residential instability, and added demand for social services. Finally, what this bill will do, if enacted, is increase the likelihood that those people who become justice involved remain that way. We know this because research shows us that detaining someone for even 48 hours increases the likelihood that they will become justice involved again at some point. We also know that people who are detained pretrial, when compared to people who are released pretrial, are less likely to take their cases to trial, and so they accept guilty pleas simply to escape the conditions of jail. As a result, they experience the catastrophic collateral consequences of a criminal conviction, denial of access to social services, job insecurity, residential instability, family instability, worsening mental health, and worsening physical outcomes, to just name a few. I'm asking that you protect your communities by voting no on 504, and it's a bill that all but guarantees that more Georgians who are legally presumed innocent are subjected to innumerable harms caused by unnecessary incarceration. Thank you.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you so much. Let's go to the next one, Ms. Coco Pappy. Did I do it right this time? I messed you up last time. I apologize for that.
That's all right.
And again, I want to reiterate here, we do still have several more, if we can keep it brief as we can. Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much.
Absolutely.
All right,
Thank you,
thank you.
Chairman. So my name is Coco Pappy. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Communications at Deep Center. And once again, I traveled here today from Chatham County to express my deep concerns about this bill. The last time I was here, I gave examples of data and cost. We gave data examples from our county jail on just how 3 categories of the most common of the 660 felony charges, 1,288 unique charges specifically, that fall into this category that are not bail restricted, that we would spend an extra $95,000. And that with a typical bond hold in Chatham County, which is 72 hours or 3 days, this will put us at $287,000 extra, right? And while the cost and data are important, so is lived experience. And today I want to share with you the testimony of people I have worked directly with who have found themselves in jail dealing with the hardship due to monetary bail on nonviolent charges. The people we talked with spoke about mental health struggles, escaping domestic violence, substance abuse, homelessness, of trying to pull themselves out of a hole and do the right thing, and they got trapped by money bail. I'm sharing some of those stories now. I went ahead and pled guilty to get out, or I'd still be stuck in there for another 16 months. I had to plead guilty just to get out so I don't lose my job, so I can take care of my kids. Otherwise, I'm sitting in there, and then what happens? Then the state's going to take my kids. It's not right. The judicial system is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but it's not. You are guilty until you prove that you're innocent. It doesn't need to work that way. I stayed in there 10 months before I was able to actually get out on bail. The complications were that I'm not originally from the state of Georgia. I don't have any family here. I've never had a contempt of court, which is what most companies want, bonding companies. The bond had to be paid in the full amount, which was like $3,000 some odd in cash in order for me to get out, instead of being able to pay a percentage on the bond. I couldn't do that. It was a very difficult task. Last testimony. We've got 2 or 3 bonding companies that they're relying on, which has a monopoly on the system here in Chatham County, and it takes money away from the poorest and most vulnerable. The people that are stuck in jail don't have the money most of the time, and it's family members of those people who are actually footing the bill. It's a revolving door, and I feel that it's all about money. Not only that you have to pay the bond, but you have to turn around and pay the jail in order to process the paperwork. It seems to be about money. Yes, we need public safety. Yes, we need accountability. Yes, we need to protect the rights of those who have been victimized by crime and honor them and respond to their needs. This bill will not do that. This bill is an example of absolute overreach, of adding excess costs to counties, specifically to jails that are already understaffed, of using the very real trauma experienced by those as a means of pushing a bill. That's not right. I am urging you to table this bill, to have a study committee, anything but let it pass forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Pappy. Let's see, let's go to the next one. I believe it's Ms. Anita Howard. If you come and introduce yourself. And again, you could be brief. We appreciate it.
Okay, this is my first time up here, so I'm going to try to be brief. No, I will. Thank you so much.
All righty.
I'm Anita Howard, and I'm the district attorney for the Macon Judicial Circuit, which includes Bibb, Crawford, and Peach counties. I am a 17-year career prosecutor. That's all I've ever done, and that is what I enjoy doing. I want to first talk about the cost and the resources concerning this bill. I have the distinction to represent, as I said, Macon, Georgia, which is the fourth largest city in Georgia with over 153,000 individuals. But I also represent Roberta, Georgia, which is about 988 residents. And so the resources there are very different. In our Crawford County Jail, we do not have the ability to house female inmates. So that means that our Crawford County females have to go to other areas, which is a cost to our county. Not only a cost for their daily housing, but also a cost, I think this mic is, can y'all hear me? Okay, good, all right. Not only a cost for their daily housing, but also a cost for transportation to and from court. And not only the monetary costs, but we all know that law enforcement, not only in the Macon Judicial Circuit, but also throughout this state, that we are understaffed. Our law enforcement is understaffed. And so I would ask you to consider that. I would ask you to consider that, yes, these individuals have been arrested with the standard of probable cause, but that does not equal guilt. And I stand here as a proud prosecutor, but a prosecutor who took an oath to make sure that justice was being done. And I know that we have to prove our cases beyond a reasonable doubt. And with the shortages that we are having with law enforcement, who are doing everything they can in Bibb County and doing a great job with what they have and the individuals they have there, but when they are pulling 14 to 16-hour shifts and they are focusing on violent crime, some of the nonviolent felonies that I am most concerned about this bill affecting are not thoroughly investigated. And I have been fortunate since I took office, January of 2021, to increase my investigative staff from 7 investigators to 13. But all circuits are not that fortunate, and there's still work to be done. The next point that I want to talk about, and that is dearest to my heart, is crime victims. What we have seen, and what I have personally seen as a career prosecutor, is they may be a defendant today, but they were a victim a few years ago. And that could either be a victim as a juvenile or a victim as an adult. We see individuals who have been victims of child molestation, individuals who have been victim of domestic violence. We offer them services, but that's a process for them to receive that. And sometimes those individuals, they self-medicate with drugs. And so you may have a defendant who gets arrested for a gram of meth. But this bill would not allow me to consider the fact that this individual was molested 4 years ago. And that's information that we have that we can provide to the court. But that's not considered. This bill does not allow me to consider the parents or the grandparents that some of these individuals steal from by breaking into their homes, by breaking into their cars. And they call my office in tears and say, I want them to get help. And they don't want to have to pay this bond. They've already gone through this cycle many times with their loved ones, but they want them to get help. And I appreciate you all considering the accountability courts. Those are great. But we have other services in our community besides accountability courts, which I support. But with our Making Violence Prevention program, we are extending services and monetary monies from the county commission to faith communities that are offering services to prevent crime. So all of those things, rehab, sometimes with accountability courts, someone will apply, but will realize that they need a higher level of care. They may need a rehab instead of that accountability court. So what I'm saying is that all felonies are not created equal. And this bill does not allow us to consider any of those factors. And all I'm asking is that, yes, I know the goal is public safety, but as prosecutors, we have the history of what has happened in these individual lives, and we're able to give that to the court. And the judges are already required to consider public safety, to consider the likelihood of reoffending, to consider the likelihood of absconding. And people are getting bonds. People are getting bonds, and people are posting bonds. And unfortunately, they are reoffending, and this bill is not going to stop that. And I heard the senator say today, he said they need to have skin in the game. Well, for me, there's more value than having skin in the game that equals money. I want a commitment that these individuals who have committed nonviolent felony offenses, who are coming back to our community, and they're coming back sooner rather than later. I want a commitment that's not, what did he say, $10? That's a mockery of a system I've dedicated my career to. I want a commitment that they want to become productive members of society, and we offer them the help, and they get the help. And I would ask you, please, to reconsider your support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you familiar with Coroner Leon Jones down there in Macon?
I am. As a matter of fact, he just called me when I was out in the hallway. I'm going to tell you what he did, and I got to talk. He's a good friend of mine, but he called me with someone on three-way. We're very good friends, but he said, hey, this person has a question about their case. And I'm thinking, Leon, you put me on the spot. But yes, I will tell him I saw you. He's a very good friend of mine.
Very good. He's probably the overworked coroner in this state.
Yes, and we have a lot of violent crime that we need, that we're focused on. I have two jury trials going right now. One is a murder and one is aggravated assault.
Well, I appreciate you so much.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Our next speaker is Representative William Bodie. Now, I know you're a lawyer, right?
You know it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right. So can you be short?
A lawyer legislator, yes, I can try.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, can't be both, right? Well, look, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. I'll be quick. Madam DA said it the best. I think we're in a situation right now where we have to listen to our prosecutors. I have sat in these same seats. Since Governor Nathan Deal has left office, we have had about 2-3 bail bond bills to come through judiciary non-civil, which I serve on. And basically, we were able to table those bills because of the same reasons that were stated here by the opponents of this bill. One of the reasons I want to make sure we dispel right now is that I have always voted in favor of any victims protection legislation, including Marcy's Law and the Victims' Bill of Rights, which came through our committee, Judicial Non-Civil, that I serve on. And this bill would not change the fact that any victim and that victim's family has to be notified of a bond hearing. And so if we have a secured or unsecured bond, that victim and the victim's family have to be notified, and they can make the objection there. What this bill is going to do is cause individuals who do not have the resources to bond out of jail on low-level, non-violent felony offenses. Of course, when this bill came through our committee, we were not going to let a bill come through our committee that has a murder charge getting the opportunity for an unsecured bond. That would never happen. But what we're doing is cutting the fabric away from where I sat, where my dear friend Chairman Lumpson sat, sitting right now in 2018 when Governor Deal's amazing criminal justice reform bill was passed right here in this room by then Senator, well, he's a senator now, Senator Brian Strickland. That piece of legislation was the dawn of a new day in this state, where we looked at criminal justice reform, and we are now a leader in criminal justice reform and a national model. We are going back on this if we pass this type of legislation. So I ask you, Mr. Chairman, and this committee to do the same thing as Judicial Non-Civil has done 2-3 times before and table this type of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bodie. Any questions? All right, we have one more speaker on this bill, and it's James Woodall. All righty. Floor is yours if you'll introduce yourself and who you're with.
Yes, sir. And I'm also going to be joined with Maisie Linger and from the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. So, Mr. Chairman, very briefly, I'll just say this, is that this piece of legislation sends a message. It's very clear that the only factor that's to be considered in whether or not justice happens is a person's ability to pay. This bill does not increase nor improve public safety. It does not address whether or not a person is or is not a threat to public safety. In fact, you got people that have been presented before a court who have gone out and reoffended. And so the only difference that situation has versus the people that are sitting currently in pretrial detention is the fact that they have either the ability to pay themselves or they have family members who can support them. And so, again, the impact that has not only on that individual but the community at large is of great concern. The other point I'll make mention of, and I'll turn over to Maisie Lynn, is that when you think about pretrial detention, they are more likely to reoffend if a person is sitting in longer periods of time in pretrial detention. And that's been proven not just here in Georgia, but nationwide. And so simply saying a person who's sitting in jail because they have a bond or don't have a bond, it makes the situation a lot worse. And the last thing I'll say is there has not been any testimony nor any evidence, nor any research, nor any statistics, nor any data that has proven that the legislation that has been proposed will actually work. It will not solve the issue that we've addressed as an issue today. And so I would urge this committee to favorably, or not favorably rather, commit this bill to the next process. Amazing.
Thanks. Chairman, thank you for hearing from us today. And I submitted some testimony last time we were here, and I will not rehash that. But upon hearing that committee hearing, one of my friends who is a law professor over at the University of Georgia, unfortunately, who is both teaching today and very sick, so I'm not sure she should be teaching today, but couldn't come here, but asked me to please tell you, put a face on this bill. This is a story about one of her clients. We do have her permission to tell you this story. Her name is Lisa. Lisa was a single mom of 5 children. Her youngest was a newborn baby. She had been a certified nursing assistant, and when she had her baby, stayed home to take care of the baby and was living off her tax return money, and also being provided some income by the child's father. The child's father left, and that caused Lisa to be evicted from the home where she lived. In an effort to find a new place to live, she signed what she understood to be a legitimate sublease on another apartment. Not too long after that, the police knocked on her door and asked her to step outside because the leasing office had called. It turns out the sublease she signed was not a legitimate sublease, unbeknownst to her, and the landlord of the property was evicting her on that basis. As the police were investigating, kind of trying to see what was going on, it's not clear from what I know how it happened, but on the counter in the home where she was going to get the lease from, there were 2 packages that appeared to be controlled substances. One field tested positive for cocaine, one field tested positive for methamphetamine. So she was charged with possession with intent to distribute drugs because she was claiming to be the leaseholder, claiming to live in this home because she believed that she was the leaseholder and lived in this home. When she went to her first appearance, which is where you first appear upon arrest, she was issued a $30,000 cash-only bond, meaning the only way she could get out of jail would be to put up $30,000 in cash. Couldn't use property, couldn't use a bonding company. This was her first lifetime arrest. We're talking about small packets of suspected drugs, cocaine and methamphetamine, about this big. When the drugs were weighed, it turned out they were actually a higher weight that elevated them to trafficking. So the warrants were reissued. I'm sorry, I got it back. I got the bond backwards. At first, the first appearance was a surety bond, so she could have used property or a bonding company for the $30,000, but she couldn't afford that. So my apologies. Starts off as a surety bond, would have cost $3,000 plus fees to get out. She couldn't afford that. When they upgrade the charges because of the weight of these controlled substances, it becomes a trafficking case, and they elevate her to a cash-only bond. So they put the cash-only provision on the $30,000 surety bond, making it cash-only. When the GBI tested those substances, only one of them came back positive, the methamphetamine. No telling what the other one was, but it was not a controlled substance that she was not to be in possession of. Her children were taken from her because she could not afford to get out of custody. She ended up being in custody pretrial for 10 months, being held ultimately again on a surety bond, but still $30,000. Her children, 5 children, were separated into 3 different homes. She lost her housing and was at risk of potentially losing her children, because you might not realize, and I didn't know this either until I got into this work, but there are timelines on reunification plans. And if parents are in custody for too long, their parental rights can be terminated. Interestingly, the team of DFACS workers, SAGs, and child advocates that were part of this family's situation, they were so impressed by Lisa and so convinced that she needed to be the person to parent these children and that it was in their best interest to be returned to her, that they sort of designated themselves Team Lisa. And they were doing all they could to work with her defense lawyer to get her out of jail, but no one could pay that bond for her. Eventually, Lisa went to trial, and she was acquitted after 30 minutes deliberation by the jury. It turned out at trial, some of the testimony was that these packages were actually found somewhere in the breezeway of the apartment and made their way into the home during all this movement with the leasing department, leasing agents and the police. And without going into getting that transcript and getting all those details, can't quite explain how that happened, but it was clear to the jury that she had nothing to do with the methamphetamine that was located on the counter in her home. So she, the case is adjudicated, and she's not guilty.
Yes,
so now she has potentially almost lost her children. She's lost her housing. She gets out, and because of her charges, it's hard to get housing again. She applied for a Section 8 voucher. She could not get it. The Atlanta Legal Aid Society took up her case and had to go all the way to federal court, and it took 2 years for her to get housing. And without housing, she could not be reunified with those children. I bring you this story to say, today, trafficking in methamphetamine is a bail-restricted offense. That anyone that starts with that has to have a cash bail. And if you are Lisa, you get a cash bond, and I would agree with Madam DA that a $10 de minimis bond is a mockery of our system, and that's not what's happening in our courts. She was at risk of losing her family, her children, and potentially her livelihood going forward. And the people involved in this case would have, if without a bill like this in place, would have had the discretion, the court would have had the discretion to take all of these factors into consideration and set a bond that she could potentially be released on. This is not a crime where anyone was hurt. This is not a crime where anyone was, harmed in any way. So we would also like to just reiterate what has been said here today about we're glad accountability courts are being covered by this new version of this bill. Unfortunately, to get into an accountability court, you still may have to wait a number of months before you're admitted into that court. You've also heard today about how there are some deficiencies in the bill with respect to being able to enter into pretrial diversion programs that are not accountability courts but are very useful in reducing crime and increasing public safety. We have, if you are interested in seeing it, a draft of an amendment that would not only allow for the accountability admission, but also for these pretrial diversion program admissions, and in situations where, for instance, the prosecuting attorney or maybe a law enforcement official needs that person to be released maybe for medical care or some other purpose that right now, under this legislation, would not be available to these people that would not be able to afford these bonds. And I would welcome your consideration of it if you would take a look.
Well, I think what we'll do is we're gonna take it as it is right now. If we get whichever way it goes now, and then if we go further, we can look at something and see if we can clean up some things there if you want to do that. But today we're gonna go on what we got,
I understand.
and we're gonna go ahead and vote one way or the other. Do we have any questions? Chairman Powell.
I'm gonna be very quick, and I want to thank you and the lady that's the DA from Bibb County. You especially impressed me. You know, we heard this bill, I think in the last meeting, and we went through a good bit of this. And at that time, I called the head of the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, and he came up and met with me. And his idea about what he could see about talking about the accountability courts, he said that there was nothing in here that prevented work in the accountability courts. Now, that being said, I want to make a statement, and maybe the DA can verify this. I'm one of those people that comes from a different world, and I'm one of those people that believes that you are guilty until proven you're innocent until proven guilty. But in our society of laws and law enforcement, the purpose of a bond is not a fine, and it shouldn't be a purpose to keep somebody locked up. The purpose of a bond is to be sure that they respond and show back up for trial. Now, my question at some point, somebody's going to have to answer, what's a better way of doing this? Personal recognizance ain't going to get a lot of people to come back, quite frankly. Would you agree, District Attorney?
Yes, sir, I would agree, but I would propose that if it was a personal recognizance, it would be with conditions. And for instance, we have individuals who don't have GEDs, and we have wonderful GED programs that have a community service component where we know these folks are going to show up.
I understand. Let me move on because we're already out of time.
I'm so sorry.
No, but I appreciate this. But it's my understanding the way the court system works, and I'll be the first to tell you that we've got a lot of police officers, they don't show a whole lot of compassion. It's black and white, there's no gray to it, but that's the purpose of these people going in front of a judge for a bond hearing. That judge needs to evaluate whether that evidence is binding enough to hold that person over. And if I also believe correctly, the amount of the bond, the judge has got that power of the judge to set the amount of the bond. He doesn't have to set it at $30,000. It could have been set at $1,000 or $500 or whatever it is. So maybe there's a need for re-educating the judiciary in some points. I know that we had a situation recently up in my district that we had I guess you would call him a respected citizen. He was a county commissioner. Beat the devil out of his brother-in-law. $30,000 bond. Now, personal recognizance could have probably paid, except he beat his brother-in-law half to death over nothing. But they did they did charge him with a bond. He stayed in jail for about a week in the process. But I thought it was interesting, the hullabaloo that ensued among the public was that the prosecutor and the judge met to decide what would be a proper bond. So if I'm not sure, is that not the power, or y'all may do different in Bibb County, but is that not how, do the judges and the DAs and the prosecutors and all, do they not meet to decide what is a proper bond?
At times, we do meet with defense counsel with the judge, so we don't have ex parte communication. We do meet and to decide what a proper bond would be, but a proper bond is always not monetary. For instance, we have a lot of young people who are addicted to drugs, who if they can go to rehab, we at the DA's office, we do not mind ORing them out so that they can, in a condition, the bond is they go to that rehab. When people bond out, monetary bond conditions, typically they don't have any conditions. There's nobody watching them. There's no supervision. There's no reporting. There's no accountability. And so that's why when he says skin in the game, I think it should be more than monetary.
I mean, it's not, by no means a perfect society. I mean, I remember at that last meeting that they were talking about the non-bondable felonies, and I was quite surprised. I couldn't believe the number that they threw out. But possibly I would encourage folks to use their influence and their political influence on the legislature. That one is they need to go through the felony statutes. They need to take a good look at them and clean up the felony statutes to start with, instead of some of this nonsense that we have to deal with legislatively. That would be a good first step. And then to utilize The community needs to utilize the sources of their influence on the prosecutors and the judges so that they're then setting a bond. And if somebody's too sick to even be in the county, we don't want them in a county jail if they have a major illness, because the taxpayers are paying for that, unfortunately. And I say that is unfortunate. But somehow I go back to the fact that if somebody has violated the law in a felony, there needs to be something put up so that that person knows that they're responsible to show back up to court. And if I'm correct, that a judge does have the latitude, they can set whatever bond they want to. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Then that's, so that being said, I move for the previous question.
Thank you, Chairman Pond. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? All right. We have a motion, we have a second. Those in favor, say aye.
Now,
Yes,
for
sir.
an amendment. On line 53,
Okay.
dealing with the accountability courts, and I would like to offer this as an amendment. If the defendant has, and it spells agreed to enter into an accountability court, to strike the word agreed to enter and say been judicially placed into an accountability court.
All right, so you want to strike,
On line 53, strike agreed to enter and say been judicially placed
judicially placed.
into an accountability court.
You got that? Okay. All right, do we have a motion for Chairman Powell's amendment? Do we have a second? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the amendment carries. Now, we'll go back to the bill itself. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, bill carried. Had one no. Okay. Passes out of committee. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, for coming for that. Now, we got one more little piece of business to do. Let's see, we still got 5:05. We got 3 folks that want to speak. We'll let the crowd clear out and then we'll go forward. Jump back in. Where'd y'all rather be, those that want to speak to the bill? You'd rather be at the podium? Okay, sounds good. We got you turned on. We got Brendan Keefe. Come on up, Mr. Brendan. And if you'll introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little camera shy. I'm usually on television, not in front of a bunch of people. I'm the chief investigative reporter for 11 Alive. My name's Brendan Keefe. It's unusual for us to be addressing the legislature, but I'm here with the auspices of 11 Alive because we believe so much in being partners in public safety. So thank you to the committee for this opportunity to help try to improve public safety in the great state of Georgia. I'm here today as a journalist, not to share an opinion or an agenda. You know what they say about reporters, our hours are long and the pay is low, but on the other hand, everybody hates us, right? But I'm here rather to share the facts and findings of 9 years of investigative reporting. I do this in our mutual interest of improving public safety. A reporter's knowledge is generally a mile wide and an inch deep. But for me, 911 is different. I've spent nearly a decade of my 30-year career exposing systemic and institutional failures within 911. News stories that have resulted in very real improvements to public safety nationwide. For example, in the next week or so, one of the big 3 cell phone carriers will announce, and you're hearing it first now, that all mobile calls to 911 on their service across the entire U.S. will finally be routed by the caller's actual location where the phone is, rather than the tower address. And that's thanks to technology invented and patented as a result of my investigation of the drowning of Chanel Anderson in Cherokee County in a pond 8 years ago because 911 couldn't find her in time. The Georgia Emergency Communications Authority was created by this General Assembly after that investigation and as a direct result. So I've spent time in dozens of 911 centers across the nation, including Georgia. They're all different. There's a saying in the industry, if you've seen one 911 center, you've seen one 911 center. But in all those I've visited, one thing is universal. Dispatchers desperately want to save lives. They are the first responders. But even a dispatcher who knows CPR may not be able to give life-saving instructions over the phone if they don't have telecommunicator CPR or emergency medical dispatch training, or if the 911 center doesn't use one of those protocols as a matter of policy. The dispatchers are generally banned from giving any pre-arrival instructions during life and death emergencies. As a result, there is no statewide standard of care. So this is important. Calling 911 in Georgia is a game of roulette. You might get a dispatcher who can guide you through CPR, or you might get one that can only send someone else to help. This is a fact. It all depends on which 911 center answers your call. And 80 of Georgia's 154 911 centers choose not to use TCPR or EMD, Emergency Medical Dispatch. That's more than half of all the 911 centers in the state. Only 74 provision this right now. I'd like to share brief sections of 2 911 cardiac calls with the chairman's position, or permission rather. The first is answered by a medically trained dispatcher. Would that be okay? Thanks.
Listen to me very carefully because I'm going to tell you how to do chest compressions, all right? I want you to pump the chest hard and fast, at least twice per second, and at least 2 inches deep. Got it? Can you feel her heart beating? Okay, then stop doing the compressions. The paramedics are there. Let them take over. All right, you done well.
Thank you, sir.
This happens every day with TCPR and EMD. That's a real call I covered, and that person lived and is alive today. The second is a dispatcher who knows CPR but is not trained or authorized to give CPR instructions over the phone. Same 911 center.
My sister, she may be having a heart attack. Please, ma'am, I'm not the one that's coming. EMS is coming, okay? I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the call. They've been dispatched.
That's the entire call because they had other calls holding. And if you can't give pre-arrival instructions, in this case, there was no need to stick around. That woman miraculously survived, and I interviewed her. Those calls are from 9 years ago when I first investigated this exact issue in a series called 911 Roulette in another state. One of the 80 Georgia 911 centers that couldn't give CPR instructions over the phone was the world's busiest airport. Thomas Lawson from Flowery Branch collapsed in the South Economy parking lot at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. He was having a heart attack. This is December 2020. His wife, Ruth, called 911 within sight of the main terminal. Clayton County 911 answered the call, which is great because Clayton County 911 is an emergency medical dispatch center. But because Thomas collapsed at the airport, Ruth's call was transferred to the airport's own 911 center, which didn't use EMD or TCPR. For the next 17 plus minutes, Ruth Lawson stood next to her dying husband while a dispatcher had no choice but to engage in small talk about the origin of her own name because ATL's 911 center didn't train or allow its dispatchers to give CPR instructions over the phone. This is just a sample from that call.
My husband has passed out, and I can't get him conscious. Let me go ahead and get the ambulance started for you, okay? Please hurry. Said he had a pain in his chest, and he has an aortic aneurysm repair. I can't even tell if he's breathing anymore. Yeah, he's gasping for air. Can't find a pulse in his neck. I'll update them with the information. He's fine. He fell down? No. Oh, you say he's gone? Yeah. Well, the paramedics isn't there. I was supposed to be born a boy, but I was born a female. So my mom had a male name, but she was watching a sitcom, and one of the housewives' name was Mayoshi, and that's how I got her name.
The dispatcher had no choice but to keep the woman calm, to do small talk, because she wasn't allowed to give pre-arrival instructions. Look, this is what happened. Ruth Lawson was transferred from a 911 center that could give CPR instructions over the phone to one that could not. Thomas Lawson was long gone by the time paramedics arrived and started CPR 22 minutes after Ruth first called 911. The average response time at the airport's 8 minutes for EMS. You can't survive a cardiac arrest for 8 minutes without someone doing CPR. Now, the irony is the airport dispatcher who answered that call was actually medically trained. She was an emergency medical dispatch supervisor 6 months earlier at Fulton County 911, but her EMD certification and airport policy actually prohibited her from using that training at ATL's 911 center because they didn't have a TCPR or EMD program there, and it's forbidden as part of the certification unless they have a program there. Now, we found at least 38 people had died from cardiac events at the world's busiest airport over 2.5 years. Yet the airport's 911 center chose not to train its staff in emergency medical dispatch or TCPR. Internal emails we obtained through the Georgia Open Records Act. By the way, thank you for the Georgia Open Records Act, because without it, we would not be able to find these things out. And that's thanks to this General Assembly. We found out why the airport didn't have this program. It literally said in an email, it's not required by post, so we don't do it. It's in black and white from the 911 director to his staff in response to our records request when we asked how many EMDs they had. And meanwhile, Thomas Lawson, by the way, is from Hall County. Had he collapsed on a grass airstrip in Flowery Branch, he would have gotten better service because Hall County is a 911 EMD center. Here's a 911 call from Hall County.
Listen carefully, I'm going to tell you how to do chest compressions. Pump the chest hard and fast at least twice per second and 2 inches deep. 1, 2, 3.
I won't play the whole call for you, but that woman also survived. And the 911 director there gave me that call for our story. So I'll wrap up here shortly. I'm sorry for taking so much of your time, but I'm almost done. 2 days after we aired the story of Thomas Lawson's death, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport got bids to medically train all of its staff. And now every dispatcher at the airport can give CPR and other medical pre-arrival instructions over the phone. I'm really here representing Thomas Lawson because that's what we do. As journalists, I'm there elevating smaller voices. I'm not even advocating for the bill. Do whatever you want with the bill. But these dispatchers need this training. The dispatchers desperately want this training. And counties and municipalities don't always pay for in-service training for 911 dispatchers because that too is not required under state law. Georgia Post requires just 40 hours of training for an emergency communications officer certification. It's excellent training. They actually do about 46 hours at Gypstick. You'll hear from the Gypstick director. The training is excellent. But they get just 40 hours for their whole career. That's the entire career. And someone can work as a dispatcher in Georgia for 6 months without that certification. They can start answering calls today and wait 6 months to get the certification. Georgia requires 37 times more training for a hairstylist certification than for a 911 dispatcher. 1,500 hours to cut hair. Obviously, they didn't do a very good job on me. But 1,500 hours to cut hair, and no disrespect to the hairstylist, despite what they've done to me, but 40 hours to answer life and death calls. Think about that. The committee knows well that Post requires 20 hours of annual training for police officers. So county and city budgets include money for that training every year because it's required. It's a mandate. Currently, there are 0 hours of mandated annual training required for 911 dispatchers, and as a result, many cities and counties simply don't do it or pay for it. One 911 director in a city run by a city police department nearby here told me that all the training money goes to police officers because that training is mandated. You need those 20 hours of post-training. I'm a former police officer. I understand that. But continuing education for 911 dispatchers is not required, and the legislation before you would rectify that. So in closing, Florida passed unanimously almost this identical bill 2 weeks ago. The full House, the full Senate. Now, I don't know if you've been watching Florida politics, but Florida lawmakers don't agree on anything. So for them to agree on this is a big deal. And Tennessee's TCPR bill took effect in January of last year, and lives have already been saved. A Tennessee dispatcher guided grandparents through CPR over the phone just months after this law took effect. Their grandson had fallen through the ice just last year. They saved his life. Meanwhile, Alabama's been training its dispatchers in TCPR and EMD for years. So Georgia currently lags behind Tennessee, Florida, and Alabama right now. So today, right now, someone crossing into Georgia from those states will suddenly be less safe when calling 911. Again, it's a game of roulette. Any Georgia resident or visitor may get a dispatcher who can give CPR instructions over the phone, or they may get a dispatcher who wants to help but can't do anything but send someone else. No one thinks about 911 until they need it in a life and death situation. Callers already have a belief and an expectation that dispatchers can give them CPR instructions over the phone. Ruth Lawson found out that's not the case in Georgia. And we'll never know if such training would have saved her husband Thomas within sight of the busiest airport in the world, because the Lawsons and that dispatcher were never given a chance. When seconds count, the ambulance is still minutes away. Thank you for your time. I'm available to answer questions, which is a role reversal if you would like me to answer any.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? No questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
We appreciate that very, very much. Ms. Laura Bracy, is that?
Yes, Laura Bracy.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. Brendan covered quite a bit, so I'll keep it short, as you've been requesting this whole this whole afternoon. But I'm Laura Bracy with the American Heart Association, and we are in full support of Senate Bill 505, particularly the part of this legislation that speaks to telecommunicator CPR. You've heard that the requirement for 911 dispatch, there's not a huge requirement for training, and there's no continuing education. And 911 telecommunicators are the very first link in the chain of survival, and they really can have an impact on the calls that they receive, as you've heard. There are 350,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests that happen every year in the U.S., and that's what I want you to think about the words out of hospital. So that means that the person who is finding this person who's had a cardiac arrest is a family member, a coworker, a gym mate, or friend. Telecommunicator CPR, or TCPR, is a training that gives 911 telecommunicators the tools and knowledge that they need to calmly walk a likely frantic and potentially untrained caller through CPR. This training has been shown to increase the chance of survival by 51%, and there are low-cost and free resources that are available online, already created. As you heard, our neighboring states have passed this legislation, and the AHA asks for your support of Senate Bill 505. We believe that no matter where you are in Georgia, whether you're visiting the coast, spending a week in the mountains, or home in one of our great cities, in the time of an emergency, every Georgian should be able to reach a 911 telecommunicator trained in TCPR. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see no questions. Mr. Chris Wigington, if you'd introduce yourself, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Chris Wigington. I'm the director of the Georgia Public Safety Training Center that conducts about 90% of all training for public safety in the state of Georgia. One of our customers is emergency communications officers, or 911 dispatchers. With this legislation, TCPR will save lives. Let me say that first and foremost. I myself, as a police officer, have administered CPR that ended up in saving somebody's life. So firsthand, I want to say that. Also, continuing education is important. That's what we do at the center, is we train people. So continuing education is important, especially in the dispatcher's role. But why I am here before you today, and Senator Robertson has been grateful in lengthening the dates of when some of these things would take effect, there is not a fiscal note attached to this legislation. So currently we have one person in the state of Georgia that's assigned to communication officer or dispatcher training. When that was mandated, that position was never funded, nor was the training ever funded. So we're still working within budgetary restraints for that training. So when I come to you today, I understand that the dates have been extended, but also know that as years pass, sometimes the promises of fiscal notes and future budgets do not take place. So I come before you today that I understand this legislation is important. There's no doubt that TCPR will save lives. There's no doubt that continuing education is needed, but we cannot do this without the proper funding.
We do have one question for you. Chairman Collins.
Thank you, Director Wigington, for all you do for our state and folks that serve and protect us day in and day out. Your service is appreciated. So in this bill, we offered a substitute, and it becomes effective on or after January 1 of 2024. Do you think that would be enough time to be able to implement asking for additional funding and training? Do you think that'll give you enough time to do that?
Yes, sir. There's no doubt we can come back next year with a proposal to put before OPB and the governor's office, then ultimately before you all. But again, that is still just a proposal at that point.
If I could have another follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. Another thing is we've talked a lot about some of the larger jurisdictions and understanding that just like the gentleman so stated, that if you've seen one 911 center, you've seen one 911 center.
That's correct.
That the infrastructure for 911 centers throughout the state is very different. And so in the training, I would think that some call centers may have one person, some call centers may have two people. And that in training, I would think we would need to develop a system to where you could still answer other 911 calls and still train people in how to tell someone how to do CPR over the phone and still answer those other calls that are needed. Is that something that going into effect in this training?
Yes, sir. So currently there are a lot of best practices or training around the nation, but there is not standard protocol.
Okay.
So there's not one protocol that's consistent. And with some of the other states that's passed this legislation already, specifically with TCPR, those states have funded this program.
Right.
But there are resources available, but those resources are not consistent across the board.
Right.
So my stance is let's put the work in on the front end, come up with consistent training, consistent standards, and then implement that all the communication officers across the state are able to receive that.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Do we want to go ahead and entertain a motion as it is amended? Do I hear a motion?
We do pass SB 505, substitute House Bill 505, LC 393496S.
Okay, we have a motion. Have a second? Got a second? All in favor? All opposed? Carries good. Thank you very much. Thank all of you for coming. Thank you, Senator.
Appreciate Papa Smurf being here with us.
Well, that suit used to be blue, and you spill some bleach in it. Blue lives matter. Oh, yeah. It was good on camera.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Absolutely.
Appreciate you. Yes, sir. Yeah, and everything you do.
Senator, I want to get with you right after. I'll start getting the ball rolling. I'm going to tell you, we got the conversation about